I still muted?
You're not muted anymore.
Okay, okay, in the future, how do I mute myself? Is
You
it on
can't.
Discord? Yeah, I figured it was. I was gonna
It's
say
on
it's
OBS.
something on. It's on OBS. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can use some sign language.
No sign language here. I just
okay.
I was like filling up on water. I was like, oh, my time's up.
Yeah, a little bit ago.
I was like talking to the staff a little bit, and I'm like, oh no.
Nope, terrible idea. All right, so we're this is the Shrewd Deuce podcast, Tuesday edition, and we got some stuff for you today. Today we're going to cover America has got some protesting problems. What else is new? We're gonna contrast some positive protests plus some negative protests. We're also going to talk about how Russell Brand is the new face of the cancel movement, the online banishment of the uninitiated, the
undesirables.
But also, we're gonna have a good news about Ken Paxton, who didn't get canceled. So we're gonna talk about the entire process that they'd like to do on us, and then Trump obviously isn't perfect. He's made some foibles. Steven's gonna love going into that. The FDA is talking about the ethics about artificial wombs. And in Canada, we got one heck of a victory. One that is definitely worth talking about. So we're going to talk about that and so much more today on this week's episode, Tuesday Newsday of the Shrewd Dudes podcast.
All right, we are back for another Tuesday Newsday.
It's going, bro.
It's going indeed. So let's just jump into some stuff.
Are we going to cover
BRICS Thursday or next week?
Do with you?
I don't know much about BRICS. Too much.
Yeah. Did you see our previous conversation with me and Jeremy?
Oh, the conversation before I came back. I was like rushing to fill my water bottle up. I was like, dang it. I'm like, is the timer up? I'm like, the timer's up. Oh no.
If we had an admonish button, I would so admonish you so hard.
Yeah.
You'd be admonished. But anyway, it's going to be good, man. So you ready to talk about some news this week?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about some news. Or the SDG conference. What is... How? Okay, hold on. Why don't I see that on Twitch?
What is SDG?
I have no idea what the SDG conference is. Cronkerworm? Talk about things that are foreign to us.
Give us a link, bro. Give a link.
Link it up, bro. Two things we guys really need to know about. Okay, I guess.
I guess so. The BRICS. We do know about BRICS. I wasn't aware of any current updates about BRICS. But I didn't know. I don't know what the SDG. Anyways, put those comments in the comment section. Any links, and we'll take a look at it. But yeah. Other than that, let's get started, Steven, because we got some catching up to do.
We do have some catching up to do, even though we had a show on Thursday. So
I know. Funny how news continues.
Yes, news does continue no matter what. So we're just gonna delay. We're not gonna talk about anything we did over the weekend.
Yeah.
People are wondering why I'm wearing glasses.
Because he's extra cool?
No, it's because my 2-year-old took my contact case and dumped my contacts in the toilet.
Those little... That's why you can't have nice things, Steven.
I know. Steph's like, come downstairs. You're not going to like it. I come downstairs and I'm like,
no.
Okay, I guess I'm ordering new contacts. So people at work were like, you look extra nerdy. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It's the way it is. So let's jump in and let's watch this video from the Post Millennial talking about Charlie Kirk getting attacked by, or at least harassed and harangued by trans supporters. So let's do that. Charlie Kirk visits Northern Arizona University, gets swarmed by angry mob of leftists and trans activists. So Just a quick warning, an update. Probably going to be NSFW. Probably. Considering the quote is F you fascist.
A lot of swearies.
So just, the children are in the room, leave.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, let's watch. Just lovely people.
Mm-hmm.
Just wonderful arguments that they presented in a entertaining way, and just clearly very literate.
They had me literally hanging off their every word. I was like, wow,
yeah,
I never considered
such
that.
Wonderful linguists.
What if he is a fascist, Stephen? I don't think I've ever considered that kind of viewpoint. Clearly, he is just pure evil, and he's basically a miniature Hitler without the mustache, and he's taking over. And these people are.
Although, admittedly, Charlie Kirk, I like the guy, but his face is just entertaining because it's squished inside his face. So if he actually had a Hitler mustache, it would look hilarious. It would be like, "Yoop, tiny mustache."
I'm sure you could pull it off with some AI kind of
Oh, I'm sure it'd be very entertaining.
Wouldn't be hard to do. By the way, Charlie Kirk is probably the most well researched and most well spoken critic of the culture war. I've seen many people who talk about Benny Johnson. You have Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is very good as well, but he's a little more intellectually
sometimes you have conversation, or people have conversations with Jordan, and then he brings in these very grandiose words and these very grandiose topics, and you're like, okay, I was following you, and now I have to think about what you're saying a little more than I normally do.
And so people can be a little bit more he's out of reach for some people. Whereas if you see Charlie Kirk, he goes on college campuses, he has regular, reasonable debates with regular kids, and you can tell he's not easily he's very, very persuasive, and he's very good at disarming all their arguments. And usually you find out very quickly that because they come with one or two attacks that they think are going to be so clever. They're like, aha, I'm going to get him. And then they love the attack, and he's completely prepared, and he has incredibly powerful counterpoints. And so when they realize that their one or two attacks didn't work, they devolve into just name calling and being mean and it's pointless talking to you. It's well, it's kind of pointless talking to you too. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad we're in agreement. Yeah. So Charlie Kirk is a good example of a person who actually engages in debate properly. He knows how to do it.
Mm-hmm. But Charlie Kirk is really good for addressing people in a very calm and rational manner, even when people are screaming in his face.
Yes,
he's very good at that.
So you listen to Charlie Kirk, even if you're really up to date, you're constantly watching political stuff. Mm-hmm. I always learn something from Charlie Kirk. Always. That's true. And however, then you have somebody like AOC, and AOC is the complete opposite. same kind of scenario where
basically the same age too.
Yep, but she has people screaming at her because they're mad at her. Mm-hmm. But then you see how she responds.
How she reacts.
And it's a complete polar opposite of Charlie Kirk.
Okay, so let's watch this little video. This should be entertaining.
Back to the barricade.
What's wrong with this America? This is the United States of America. Yeah, that's what is this? What is this here then? Yeah, barriers for who? For who? For us? For the United States? No, you come down. You're complicit in destroying our city. You come down, you oath breaker. You gotta go to sleep at night. Hey, mother.
Very.
immigrants make America strong.
Two immigrants make America strong.
My dad fought for this country. World War II. You.
It's so entertaining. It's like,
Right,
of
so
course,
look-
yeah, you know, like they're not the most like coherent people,
No.
but
Okay, so go down to like what like they quoted as her words. I think it's right after the picture, right here.
oh, this one, yeah.
Yeah.
So what we seek to do is we make sure all the resources are necessary. We're joining with the city and state. Ocasio-Cortez, before a megaphone-wielding man shouting over the top of her. According to Fox News, illegal immigration is not right. No, he's screaming this.
Oh, he's screaming this. Yeah.
Illegal immigration is not right. Respect the Constitution. Close the border. She tried to continue listing off solutions to the worsening humanitarian crisis. I think there are 3 points of consensus here that are very important in getting a solution to that issue. The first, there's consensus across...
She's way more high-pitched and shrill.
That's
Like,
true.
you know, yeah,
There's a
she's way more
consensus here across geographies and state on increased federal resources to cities
Yeah,
and
better.
municipalities dealing with this issue. The second is to allow for work authorizations so that folks in here can get to work and start supporting themselves as soon as possible. They are prevented from getting jobs. They are prevented from employment, and that's part of the strain on our public systems. The faster that folks can access the work that they're asking for legally, the better we can solve.
That doesn't solve anything.
No.
Now here, let's contrast the two situations, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the people who went to the Charlie Kirk event, okay? They were not directly affected by whatever Charlie Kirk is doing. Charlie Kirk is there primarily to speak to the conservative crowd that paid to watch his event. Those people are culture warriors. These are low information, easily like first order thinkers from the left that are basically been brought into the cult like leftist kind of like mindset, that are basically told by all their all their friends and all the people around them, Charlie Kirk bad. You don't need to know how. He's just bad. And they call him a million names. So that's the people that are protesting. Here, these are New Yorkers. These are people directly affected by AOC and Jerry Nadler, and they're angry because the decisions made by Congress and by the government are directly impacting them. Okay, all these migrants are ruining the city. They're straining resources, and people are suffering as a result. Now, look at the way that Charlie Kirk, when he responds to people, he's fully willing to talk to them, to talk to the people. However, AOC, when she's there out in public, she's talking to who, Stephen? She's talking to the camera.
Yep.
To the
She's not
reporters.
talking to the citizens.
She's not. She has no interest whatsoever in talking to the citizens, because AOC is the kind of politician that knows without any doubt that she is completely safe in her seat, because she lives in the district in New York that it's like the chances of her being voted out are so small that she can pretty much get away with ignoring her constituents. Like they're not important to her. And so you have two basic kinds of people. And the funny thing, this is New York. These are not Republicans and these are not conservatives that are criticizing AOC and Jerry Nadler. These are their own people, right?
These are
Whereas
New Yorkers.
with Charlie Kirk, it's like the lunatic left that decided that they have to, in order to get themselves a sense of meaning and purpose, and I've done something to serve mankind, and I'm helping make things better. They basically feel like they have to attack all the people they hate. So those people are not actually doing anything valuable. Whereas these people who are opposing Cortez are basically voicing the very real
Their
concerns of
yeah,
people,
the concerns of their people.
of people that are angry at them. So
yeah,
it's a crazy context.
Yep. But of course, the things that AOC wants are happening right now in Texas.
Sure are.
So right now in Texas, you have over 2,200 migrants caught on video illegally crossing border near Eagle Pass, Texas overnight.
Dang, man.
So they're apparently not getting the Biden administration's "Do Not Come" message, because that's what the Biden administration is sending. Sure. So, Border Patrol sources told Fox News that more than 22 people crossed illegally since midnight. Sources provided cell phone video recorded in Piedras Negras, the Mexican... Of course,
Black Rocks.
Okay.
Piedras Negras
Mexican city across from Eagle Pass, showing a stampede of migrants rushing to the river's edge overnight and crossing a lengthy line in the river from shore to shore. The mass crossing happened right next to the port of entry in Eagle Pass, which is the legal way to cross. Fox News' drone team shot additional video on the U.S. side early Monday morning, showing the large group of migrants being processed by U.S. Border Patrol. This comes after exclusive video shot in Zacatecas.
Okay, before you go on,
Yep.
Before you go on, you played that video?
This one?
Yeah, it's actually really good.
No, hombre, van pasando por la... No, hombre, no es ni una cuarta parte de lo
Wow,
que viene.
that's a steady stream.
Yeah. Put it full screen.
No sé, es que nosotros vivimos pegado al riel, pero allá por el puente peatonal de la Plaza de las Culturas. No, hombre, pero se bajó exageradamente un chingo de raza.
Chingo de raza. A crap ton of raza would be like racist. Wow. Just crossing in the middle of the night.
Yep.
Dang it.
They just didn't get the "Do Not Come" message. Mm-hmm.
They're still coming.
So,
dang, man.
Yeah. Following the Title 42 public health order that was lifted on May 11th, CBP says the United States returned to fully enforcing Title 8 immigration authorities to expeditiously process and remove individuals who arrive at the U.S. border unlawfully and do not have legal basis to stay. Mm-hmm. Border crossings dropped anywhere from 50 to 70% after the expiration of Title 42. Over the past several weeks, border crossings have reportedly again begun to surge. Yep. This is...
Well, what are your thoughts, man? Give us some thoughts.
We knew that the Democrats would not put a serious effort into stopping illegal immigration because, of course, it's a long-term voter block. They're going to put them through these kind of, promise to appear. We're going to give you a phone so that you can promise to appear, and then you won't show up at your court hearings, and then we're basically going to just forget that you're in the United States.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if they're willing to cross the border illegally, then the inclination towards other types of crimes is much higher than someone who took the time and did the process properly.
Mm-hmm.
And the Biden administration, according to all rational understanding, just doesn't care.
I think we have to remember too, though, that this is okay. So we're looking like, very, very like narrow view into the forest, okay, the trees. But if you back up a little bit and you see what is actually going on, this is a much bigger strategy worldwide. Okay, this is not just happening in the United States. This is also happening in Canada. Like Canada, this year alone, we surpassed the 40 million population mark in Canada, which was huge for like the longest time. In Canada, we were like in the 30 millions. That this is not an accident. This is totally on purpose. And our government, our Canadian government, has pledged that they intend to bring in ridiculous amounts of new. They call them immigrants, but they're not immigrants. They claim that they're refugees, but they're not refugees. This is all. Like the left basically uses language as their tool. They manipulate language. They manipulate the messaging. But this is happening all over the world. You look at like Europe. Europe is it is a test case of the worst when you bring in completely unvetted, completely unplanned mass migration, which has been the strategy for the last 10 years. So Europe is basically it is falling apart because for years, most of like the modern era, from even like the 17, 18, 1900s down to the 20th century, you had organized, planned, and purposeful immigration. How many people you take. I remember studying in Canadian history class that the Canadian government was very intentional of like the kind of immigrants that they wanted to come, how many they brought in, and they would take a lot of time to think, like, how many people are we going to take in this year? Because you have to make a calculation and determine how many can we take without completely and totally um, damaging and wrecking our own economy. The problem is that the new strategy is them selling out their own people. It's sold to you under the guise of compassion, but this is totally I call it weeds. It's basically like a weaponized emotional extortion, distortion, and sedition. It's what they're doing. They're basically trying to destroy the country from within by bringing in so many immigrants that they're almost trying to create a fight. They're trying to get the local people to be totally overwhelmed and frustrated and angry, and it's working. So what's happening there is a microcosm of the big strategy, which is this is by no means them trying to like solve problems. This is them basically trying to create problems. They're trying to destroy the country from within. So it only makes sense if you actually understand that's their strategy. That's what they're trying to do. They want to destroy the country. Now, that's what's happening in the States. Obviously, we're seeing countless stories of this kind of stuff happening, but then you see perhaps a little preview of where this could lead in the next story, which is from Summit News. I think Stephen can kind of pull that up.
Yep, I'll pull that up right now. Okay, so Germany. 8 migrants arrested for sexual assault of 13-year-old girl in Cologne swimming pool. This is not the first time this has happened. So after the 13-year-old German girl was assaulted, they arrested 1 Iraqi, 3 Turks, and 4 Syrians.
Dang.
According to police, there were 8 suspects between the ages of 16 and 26 who were said to have surrounded the girl in a bathroom at the pool. They harassed her and fondled her. According to the police report released on Monday, the main suspect, a 16-year-old Iraqi, is said to have reached inside the girl's bikini bottom. She freed herself from her attackers and went to inform a lifeguard, who then called the police. They arrived in 7 patrol cars and discovered the suspects at the exit of the pool. 3 of the other suspects have Turkish citizenship and 4 have Syrian citizenship. The investigation remains in its early stages. It's unclear how far the sexual assault went. But the 16-year-old Iraqi has already been charged with sexual assault. So, the interrogations are happening now, but this is just a continuation as what has been happening basically since pretty much 2015, 2016 in Germany and across all parts of Europe, because of course during the Syrian refugee crisis, Europe basically just opened its borders and took as many people as possible under the guise of, oh, well, we want to be welcoming and encouraging and we don't want to turn anyone away. But when you have people showing up that don't have passports, and where a whole bunch of young men are showing up and they don't have families or children, then you have issues because you have young men and very few places for them to take out their aggression. And unfortunately, a lot of these Middle Eastern countries have quite frankly barbaric views on how to treat women.
Well, and it's more than that, because a lot of these communities, like they have, like, tactics. Like, you and I have seen this, Stephen. In Germany, they had a lot of tactics where they would basically swarm. They would surround a girl with like anywhere between 8 and 20 guys would surround a woman, block anybody else from getting into the middle, and then the woman trapped in the middle can basically be raped or assaulted by 1 or 2 men who are basically overpowering her. It's something that was horrifying when you first heard about it, but then you find out that this was actually like a strategy that was basically like practiced in places like Egypt and Somalia and other places across the world. It's meant to be both kind of like a thrill, but it's also meant to be like humiliation. It's like you're trying to humiliate the foreign people that you don't like. These are a Muslim way of basically humiliating what you call the what are they called? Infidels, the people who are like who are against Allah, essentially. So, Stephen, I don't know if you could go back to the story, the article. They have like they basically talk about some similar incidents that have happened, and that this is not just one story. If this was a story by itself, it would be bad enough. But there's like a whole string of things that have happened.
Well, this is so Remix News in 2016. A town near Cologne banned all migrant men from going to a public pool due to repeated cases of sexual harassment in one criminal case. The ban was instituted to persuade asylum seekers to change their behavior. Leaked police report in 2016 showed there was a concerning rise in migrant sexual assaults at swimming pools in the German city of Dusseldorf. Last year, 3 12-year-old girls were sexually assaulted in a Kaufbeuren public swimming pool in Bavaria by 6 older teenagers. Bavaria. In 2017, 2 asylum seekers, including a Syrian former ISIS member, were arrested for sexually assaulting 2 girls, 12 and 14. Last year in Berlin, there were numerous mass brawls involving migrant men, including one that was caught on film and ended up going viral. Yeah. And of course, we do remember there was, what was it? It was like the New Year's party in, was it in Cologne or was it in Munich? There was a New Year's party, I think it was back in 2016.
Yes, it was. It was a big celebration.
And there was like 8 girls that were publicly raped on New Year's Eve.
Yep. And it was a scandal. It was a complete scandal all across, like, you know, in international news. You had to look for it because one of the things that you learn when you're basically red-pilled is you realize that the news is complicit. They're complicit in protecting the narrative. They don't care about reporting like important things or news. The news, the supposedly, like, you know, trusted news sources were intentionally covering up the assaults because their narrative is that mass migration good, and so we have to hide anything that might make it look bad. And so, yeah, it happened. And when we saw the stories, we're like, dang, this is brutal. But this is the kind of stuff that starts to happen when you're basically trying to solve the world's problems, supposedly, by mass immigration, which you cannot do. You cannot solve the world's problems with this mass migration. Stephen, have you ever seen that? It's a very popular video on YouTube, or it's all over the place about a guy uses gumballs to demonstrate how you cannot solve mass migration through or like, you know, like the world's problems through mass migration.
Okay.
And he basically demonstrated, like, you know, using gumballs to represent like a certain number of people. He showed the actual population of the world in Asia, Africa, South America, in comparison to like places like the United States. And he basically said, like, it's impossible because everywhere in the world, the population is like going up massively everywhere. And even if you import like insane amounts of like numbers of immigrants to like places like North America or like Europe, you would never even come close to making a dent in the amount of people coming in, and you're only weakening and destroying the countries themselves. It's a powerful image, and it's one of those things that, like, when you see it, you can't unsee it. I'll see if I can find it, but yeah, so just watch out, because what they're doing is it's imagine like Steven, you have 4 kids, okay? It has taken you a long time to get them to play well together, to get along, to play nice, right? And so it's taken a long time for you to do that. But imagine you bring in like one African kid, you bring in one Asian kid, you bring in one Muslim kid from the Middle East, you bring in one, like, all these different kids, and of course you're going to get chaos because they don't understand each other. They have different cultural mores that they're used to. They're going to fight. It's amazing to me that people are shocked when you bring these migrants into the countries and they basically end up clashing with locals, because when you do it like that, when you do it too fast, it's just always going to create chaos. But yeah, anyways, so that's basically, like, the migrant crisis is on purpose. It's being done for the sake of the grand plan, which is basically to completely and totally destroy Western democracies in order to be able to install a sort of, like, communist style new world order. That's what the ultimate plan is. But the same people who are doing this are the same people that were basically are now currently trying to do an online banishment of Russell Brand. And that takes us into our next story, if you want to take, Stephen.
Yep. All right. So starting off with Jeremy Boring on Twitter. So terrible decision, terrible precedent. Social platforms should not act as extra legal arbiters of guilt and innocence. These companies think they're gods. They're governments or gods. So this is a reference to Russell Brand. So Russell Brand's friends defend him in the wake of shocking rape allegations and insist wife Laura will stand by him. Quote, he is vulgar and he is offensive, but he is not a monster. He was accused of rape, sexual assault, and emotional abuse by 4 women. Accusations of abuse are said to have shocked those in his sober circle. The fallout has reportedly taken an emotional toll on his wife, Laura Gallagher. The 48-year-old, wow, he's 48. Does not really look it. British-born star has been a substance-free since 2002, and according to one woman who has known him since his early days in recovery, those in his sober circle are shocked by the accusations of abuse that he is now facing. 4 women came forward with claims that they had suffered rape, sexual assault, and emotional abuse at the hands of Russell between 2006 and 2013 in a bombshell joint investigation between the Sunday Times and Channel 4. Now, sources close to the comedian, who has vehemently denied all the allegations, have come forward to voice their shock over the claims while revealing the brutal toil the scandals took on his wife. Everyone is shocked right now. He's been a driving force in so many people's recovery, and it's helped thousands of people get clean, said one woman who went through recovery with him. And so this is kind of the roadmap. So the timeline of complaints. 2004, 2006. So apparently Brand's behavior on Big Brother's Big Mouth reported to Endemol managers. Helen Berger, hired as Brand's assistant, told in an interview being gay was a plus. Claims Brand and co-host of the Russell Brand show, Matt Morgan, would sometimes undress in studio. Leslie Douglas, BBC controller for Radio 2 and 6 Music, received complaints about Brad's behavior, including Brand hurling objects and urinating in a bottle in view of everybody. Saxgate scandal, Brand resigns from the BBC in 2008. LA police alerted to rape allegation on Nadia. 2013, colleague hears Phoebe screaming during alleged sex assault in his LA home. Brand pitched his host for Channel 4 show Solution to Concerns about behavior to take female crew off show. Alice contacts Brand. Alice, another complainant, contacts Brand's literary agent, Tavistock Wood, about what he allegedly did to her when she was 16. Lawyers deny allegations. Tavistock Wood and talent agency Curtis Brown cut all ties with Brand, saying they were horribly misled.
Mm-hmm.
So, because of these allegations, he's, of course, getting a lot of people going after him online. And even though these are just allegations, and of course you cannot provide any evidence or proof of something that happened so long ago, YouTube has suspended Russell Brand from advert income. The video platform said it was taking action to protect its users. Meanwhile, the BBC said it removed some programs featuring the comedian and actor from its streaming services. Comes after, of course, these accusations. BBC said it removed some content that now falls below public expectations from iPlayer and BBC Sounds. Earlier on Tuesday, a YouTube spokesman said if the creator's off-platform behavior harms our users, employees, and ecosystem, we will take action. So he has, in recent years, he's repositioned himself, posting regular video about spirituality, anti-establishment politics, and recently UFOs. To his 6.6 million subscribers, he posts on Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Rumble. So this is, of course, all very recent. This came to light over the weekend. It's big news over the weekend.
By the way, quick question.
Yes.
Was any of this, were any of these like events that are supposed to happen, these accusations, did any of them happen recently?
They say most recently is 10 years ago.
Yeah. Why now? Why is it coming out right this moment?
I would say it's coming out this moment because Russell has been, I don't know. Okay. When was Russell's appearance on Bill Maher?
Well, you can look it up. Look it up.
I'm looking it up right now.
I think you can find it on X if you just type in
April of this year.
Yeah. So Russell Brand appeared on Bill Maher.
Yeah.
And he had he's had like a lot of like he's been very vividly outspoken, right? And a lot of people see a lot of people know they know how the how the media the machine works. Okay, we've seen it before. Let's think of a couple of examples of coordinated hit jobs that have always come up at a very specific, like almost like all at the same time, and they're almost always like targeting somebody who's become a concern or an issue for like the machine, and they always suspiciously have like very they're very light on the facts or on the actual details, and they're sensational. So I could name a couple off the top of my head of examples I could think of the media basically weaponizing this. Okay, so for example, Alex Jones is obvious. They all at the exact same time, a massive amount of hit jobs, followed almost instantly by a massive amount of cancellations from like YouTube, Twitter, all these kind of places. I can think of Milo Yiannopoulos.
Yep.
Okay, Milo was a kind of a thorn in the side of many people on the left who did not like the fact that he was speaking very favorably of conservatism from a gay perspective.
Yep.
And so almost all at once, there was a coordinated, it literally dropped at the exact same time.
Yep.
Multiple news sources dropped the same allegation. He's basically a pedophile. That's basically what they were all claiming. And yet the evidence that he was actually a pedophile was so incredibly just suspect that it was downright almost like a complete and total farce. Another example, Andrew Tate. All at once, out of nowhere. Like every major publication comes up with all sorts of Andrew Tate's like this horrible monster and all that, and then wham, he gets like deplatformed all at once. We've seen this before. And people always like to say that oh well we have to follow the evidence. I'm like, the problem is these the news sources that are doing this and all the people that are throwing these things out there, they know full well that all they have to do is throw this stuff out there, and by the time everything's resolved, people have moved on. And all that happens is people remember, oh yeah, do you remember Russell Brand? Like, oh yeah, the guy that with that. It's like they don't have to prove this. They don't have to prove anything. All they have to do is throw it out there. Because in the modern day, what happens is that they don't do assassinations anymore. They don't kidnap. They don't do anything like that anymore. What they do is they do what's called basically a mass banishment. An online banishment. Yep. In the past, in the Roman Empire. Speaking of how guys always think about the Roman Empire. In Roman Empire, if there was somebody who wasn't necessarily criminal, but they were a gigantic thorn in the side of the elites, the power, they would banish them. They would banish them to some remote island somewhere where they're basically no longer a problem, because hey, you're banished. You can't speak anymore. You can't cause problems for me anymore. That's what's happening with people like Russell Brand. So now the question is he actually guilty of rape? I don't know. I would absolutely dissuade anyone from just assuming, oh, people are these media sources are throwing out claims. It's got to be true. I'm like, no, that's not what you do. Is there a possibility? Sure, there's maybe a possibility, but when you're looking at what is more likely, is it likely that Russell Brand really is these incredible amounts of allegations that all came out all at once, all suspiciously right after some very spicy comments on places like Bill Maher and all that? Or is it more likely that these people really care about justice, and there's really they just want the truth to come out, and they just want women to be taken care of? Occam's razor would say the more likely scenario here is that he's an enemy of the state. This is what they do. This is the pattern. I think Occam's razor would basically say the more likely conclusion is that Russell Brand is being canceled, just
he's hitting on the right notes.
Exactly.
Even in this past year, the past 9 months, I've noticed at least notably one other person that was definitely hit by kind of the cancel culture mob right after he kind of hit the nail on the head with a certain big company from Germany. Names with Lizer. CNN said he's guilty. CNN is always right. We could go down the list of all the ones who are always right. I pray to CNN. Anna Jules, you were hilarious.
CNN knows all.
But anyway,
I mean,
so
even with Ryan Stelter gone, somehow they still manage to keep their incredible.
So they push a lot of interesting things there on CNN.
They do. They sure do. They push a lot of things, including a lot of people off the cliffs.
But anyways, like talking about reporters, like James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe hit the nail on the head when talking about Pfizer, exposed some very, very crazy stuff that was going on, and within a week, he was canned by Project Veritas, and was like, oh, like he was harassing and abusing women, and it was like, I'm the woman that apparently he was abusing, and that's nonsense. So, yeah, when you're very close to hitting the nail on the head, they're coming for you. And unfortunately, the establishment is very afraid when you start to come for their power. James O'Keefe cannot defeat Yale. Unfortunately not. Yale's too woke.
Yale's like super woke. And, they're definitely
Mensa.
going broke.
They've gone for broke. That is for sure.
They
All right. So, but continuing on with kind of cancel culture. So, Russell Brand is starting the fight against cancel culture, but Ken Paxton is sort of on the tail end of it. So Paxton.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story, so take it away.
So the acquittal, is it a true victory for Texas Republicans? This is from Yahoo News. So the Republican Attorney General, Ken Paxton, was acquitted by the state Senate of 16 charges in his recent impeachment trial, allowing him to keep his job as a top lawyer in the Lone Star State. He's been impeached earlier this year by the Texas House of Representatives based on allegations that he misused his office. Related to accusations from Paxton's own aides that he had participated in improper influence, abuse of office, bribery, and other potential criminal offenses. They later spawned an FBI investigation, because we know how legitimate those are, and led to Paxton's eventual impeachment.
Super legitimate.
So the impeachment split the chambers of the Texas GOP-led legislature down the middle. He was impeached by the House with a 121-23 margin, with 60 Republicans joining 61 Democrats voting to impeach. Once the trial reached the Senate, though, the margins were flipped. 16 Republican senators, mostly staunch hardline conservative, voted to acquit Paxton, with only 2 GOP senators joining 12 Democrats and voting to convict. This fell short of the 21 total votes needed to remove him from office, but does Paxton staying on as Attorney General represent a true victory for Texas Republicans, given the contention between the state's 2 Republican majorities? So, I haven't done a whole lot of research into this story, so maybe you could kind of go into it, because I've sort of heard like stuff on the edges.
Yeah. So, long story short, what happened in Texas is was it John Paxton or
Ken Paxton?
Ken Paxton, thank you. So Ken Paxton has been probably the most effective and amazing, state attorney general in Texas and probably in the country. So he's very effective. So what happened is, whenever somebody is Democrats love to misuse the law and totally abuse their office and their power and their positions to accomplish their goals. Like, for an example, look at what's happening obviously with Trump. Everyone from Fannie Willis in Georgia to Jack Smith in DC to these are all completely political, total abuse of power. They don't care. They're willing to do it. However, Ken Paxton is the most effective and successful Republican attorney general, and he's doing a lot of good in Texas. So a lot of people who are in Texas and across the country, they said we need to get rid of this guy because he's way too powerful. By the way, I'm basing a lot of this insight on Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk has covered this in great detail. He's great. He's very into it. So what they did is they came up with an excuse, which is they tried to take his personal life and his own failings in his personal life and use that as an excuse to go after him. So Ken Paxton has had some affairs and some problems, none of which we are basically affirming or even excusing. Those are absolutely not something we would defend. But it's obvious that this is basically a political hit job by the elites, by people in Texas. Now, normally, and people have said this, that 10 years ago, if they went after somebody like Ken Paxton, 10 years ago, it would have been a done deal. He would have absolutely been removed because they would have used their power and influence to try to like remove him by putting pressure on the state senators to vote for the impeachment to follow through, because the House votes to impeach, and then the Senate has the final word. If the Senate approves the impeachment, then you're removed. Okay. However, what they didn't count on was that there was a massive pushback from the ground, from grassroots, that basically threatened and basically told the state senators, we are not behind you on this. We do not accept this political hit job against Ken Paxton. And they were able to basically get enough support to basically make it so that they couldn't actually vote him out. So the grassroots, this is one of the most amazing grassroots movements that basically stopped a political hit job. And a lot of people in Texas are really mad because the Bushes, which is by far the most powerful and most influential family in name in Texas, was kind of pissed because they were not able to get the impeachment that they wanted. They weren't able to remove this guy in order to keep their agendas and their plans going. So this is one of the least talked about stories, but it's incredibly impactful because it's one of the times when the left went after. And by the way, Texas is obviously very Republican, like leaning, but they have a lot of people pretending to be Republicans, but that are actually like closet Democrats, like a lot of rhinos in Texas in the state legislature. So don't get fooled by that. The left tried to cancel Ken Paxton and they weren't able to, and it's because of the grassroots. And it was amazing to see. And this is kind of a sign that the grassroots are not having any of it, and we're starting to get more and more influence and power. And people who once believed they didn't have a voice now are starting to realize, wow, look what we did with Bud Light. Look what we did with Richmond, north of Richmond. Look how we decimated Disney and Netflix and Target. People are starting to wake up and realize that they have a lot more power. And so this is like a good sign that the country's on the right track, that people are no longer easily fooled, and that the people who once had a stranglehold on power may be starting to lose that power. And so this is good news.
At least in terms of the culture.
Yeah, it's a culture that in America, the grassroots, the people like on the ground, the conservatives are starting to consolidate and they're starting to take back a lot of the momentum. The momentum is starting to shift a little bit in the States, which is good. So keep that in mind. That's why I wanted to cover the story.
Yep. All right. But that's not the only story we're going to be covering today about interesting things. So, DOJ charges Trump supporter at center of January 6th conspiracy theory. Literally, like, I searched a whole bunch of articles, and this is the only one that wasn't like far-right conspiracy. That actually was unfounded. Like this is fairly middle compared to all the other ones.
Yeah,
they're still like not completely on board, but let's just read it. So, a January 6th riot at the center of an unfounded conspiracy theory was charged by the Department of Justice on Tuesday for his actions during the Capitol riot.
By the way, that's nonsense. There's videos of ray-ups.
Oh yeah, there are
all over the place. If people were charged who weren't even at the Capitol
with 22 years,
ray-ups is absolutely a gigantic Achilles heel for their credibility.
Yeah. So, why it matters? Trump supporter was falsely deemed a covert FBI agent who helped incite the attack, which he did, was charged with one misdemeanor count of disorderly and disruptive conduct on restricted grounds. The DOJ charged by the information, which does not require a grand jury's vote, suggests he may enter a plea agreement with prosecutors. So the filing accuses Epps of knowingly disrupting government business and functions through conduct in the Capitol and its grounds. If it goes to trial and convicted, he could face a fine and up to 1 year in prison.
No, this poor innocent soul.
So, according to this outlet, the conspiracy theory against Epps began as obscure right-wing media outlets compiled heavily edited videos to portray him as a government agent. Yes, it's heavily edited to say, we're going to go into the Capitol. That's... Yeah, heavily edited.
By the way, this is lying through through manipulation of language. This is what they do. It's like that. By the way, when you hear the word conspiracy theory, think crazy.
Yeah,
that's really
meant,
what.
That's meant to what you're. That's how you're meant to look at it. This is completely out to lunch.
Yes,
and of course, like there are some that are completely crazy. Like,
but they're lumped together. They're lumped together.
Yeah, like I talked to somebody over the weekend, and they're like, no, like Trump purposely let Biden win, and I'm like, what?
Nope.
I'm like, really? That's pretty crazy, man. And he's like, he purposely did it so that he could expose all the traitors, and I'm like, and he left power, and he let them indict him on 90 charges, potentially spending like 700 years in prison, and he did that on purpose. He's like, yes, you'll see. Well, everyone will see. And I'm like, okay, that's crazy. And then, this one guy was like, you're being so mean, because I'm like, meth is a hell of a drug. He's like, you're being so mean, accusing him he's on meth. And I'm like, well, accusing him he's on meth is actually pretty nice. Because if he's on meth, then it kind of gives him an out instead of you're just full-blown crazy and you should be in a padded cell.
Here, do me a favor, Stephen. I just put a link on the chat. Yeah. I want you to open up really quick and go to the picture. You know what I'm talking about, right?
This is the pyramid, isn't it?
It's the pyramid. The pyramid. Now,
it's the pyramid.
The reason I want to point this out is because I saw this years ago. It's very helpful. This is what they do. It's basically like they want to make it sound like credible like ideas are like basically the same as completely nonsense and totally crazy ideas. Yeah. This is the game that they play. So look at so go into like some of the
I'm just zooming in.
Yeah,
there we go. Okay, so here we go. The conspiracy theory pyramid. So things that actually happened. Big oil pushed climate disinfo.
Yep.
Sure. That totally happened.
I mean, these are things that all happened. MK Ultra happened. Free Britney happened.
NSA, FBI, Mockingbird. Yep, those all happened.
Okay.
Yep. We have questions. Jimmy Hoffa. Denver International Airport. Epstein didn't kill himself. UFOs. I have no questions about UFOs. JFK assassination. We live in a simulation. Because that's something where it's like, yeah, this is totally grounded in reality. Okay. Unequivocally false, but mostly harmless. Avril Lavigne replaced. Michael Jackson still alive. Ted Cruz, the Zodiac Killer. Yeah, that's not mostly harmless.
Yeah, that's pretty out there and crazy. Actually.
Greta Thunberg is a time traveler. Well, you'd have to be a really dumb time traveler.
I like how they say like Prince Charles is a vampire.
I know.
Like, that's crazy.
Tupac alive in Siberia. Titanic never sank. Kylie Jenner is a clone.
Elvis lives.
Okay. Dangerous to yourself and other. Apparently saying Biden is a robot is dangerous to yourself and others. COVID is a bioweapon.
I love how they so they put this together. Chemtrails chemtrails is not a conspiracy theory. That actually happened.
It does happen.
They literally put that in the air, right? That's not crazy. Right?
Yep.
The idea that pandemic, okay?
Yep.
The whole concept of that is that this was a planned thing. There is some truth to that.
Yep.
It's not crazy to believe that. Vaccines, microchips, that one has no evidence, but the people had like a lot of guesses during the thing.
Yeah. Global warming hoax.
Yeah, the idea that global warming is a hoax. It's like they put completely crazy things together with things that are actually somewhat reasonable to infer. Like essential oils cure all illnesses. Okay, that's clearly
that's
really out there, but they put it right next to the idea that COVID is a bioweapon. I'm like, give me a break. Even top notch doctors that have incredibly high reputations will actually say that to some extent they agree with that idea. This is what they do. They try to cut. They try to put the crazy with the with the reasonable.
Oh yeah, they do that. Like here, you have the reptilian overlords with the Illuminati and the flat Earth and deep state, and it's like okay, well yeah, there's no evidence for the flat Earth, but there is a deep state for sure. There's also a uniparty.
The New World Order. You think that totally made up from nowhere?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep. Oh, and like cultural Marxism. Oh yeah, like that totally exists. That definitely exists. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that.
Or like Bill Gates depopulation. Like I'm like, are you telling me that Bill Gates and none of these cultural want to reduce the Earth's population?
Yeah, Nazis on the moon, Hollow Earth next to the trans agenda. It's clear that there is a trans agenda. Come on. There
is a trans agenda. Like, okay, like adrenochrome. We already know that that's a thing, and we know that some people will actually do that. It's not crazy and it's not nuts. This is what they do. They try to put you in the same box.
Well, yeah, like we were saying this when COVID, like when the COVID vaccine was coming out, and we were skeptical and we were raising questions. And then it was, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. And it's like, okay, well, there's a difference between being a COVID vaccine skeptic and being a vaccine skeptic in general and believing that like vaccine causes autism. Like there's different degrees. Yes, and people are like, no, it's all the same. And I'm like, see, this is why people don't like the way that you speak to people. Mm-hmm. Because if you're having these grandiose assertions, if you're saying that everybody who disagrees with me should be looped into one big, as Hillary says, a basket of deplorables, instead of saying, okay, well, we're going to address each of these ideas, and we're going to say, okay, this is how we're going to address this one, this is how we're going to address this one, and this is how we're going to address this one, then it's much less divisive than saying, oh, everyone who believes this, well, you're a danger to yourself and society. That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense to try and accuse someone of being a danger to themselves because they have serious questions, because it's very clear that the world has some seriously shady people running it.
Right, and that's the problem. Like, if you and I, Stephen, have been out in street protests of all kinds, and when you meet the left, you meet people who are low information. These are not people who encourage critical thinking. They don't. They encourage conformity, and they encourage people to just follow the recipe. Only listen to the people on their side, and they're told don't talk to people on the other side. They're not just wrong; they're evil, and they're gonna try to talk you out of it. This is why they're a cult, right? So. This is the game that they play. They try to make it sound, oh, that's you can have a totally reasonable, evidence-based, claim, and they'll just lob the accusation out, and they expect that, oh, I've made an accusation and it's true because I've made it. So a good example I like to say is that whenever somebody accuses you, let's say you're a conservative and you make a reasonable claim, okay? About about something. Oh, there's a pattern of a lot of abuse in the trans community that people need to people in the trans community really need to address. And they immediately call you a transphobe. Okay? My usual response now to people like that is prove it. Because they just throw it out there and it's oh, it's true because I've said it. Okay.
I have a common response to that sort of thing. And so when people call me, oh, you're a bigot and you're a transphobe and you're all these things, I'm just like, okay, whatever. It's like if they start calling you names and they go after you personally instead of addressing your arguments, they've already lost.
Yeah.
Lose a child to what, as Disa Kong says. I have no idea what.
I don't know.
Oh, to the COVID jibby jabs?
That would not surprise me at all.
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
No,
but
there's so many
I don't know for sure.
Yeah,
it's very hard to say absolutely 100%. We can look at situations where somebody Oh yeah, it was LeBron James' kid,
Oh, really?
wasn't it?
Well, maybe you can say. I don't know. I don't know who.
I'll look it up.
Okay.
I thought it was LeBron James' kid.
Okay. So the reason why I say this is because the left has a giant collection of words
Yeah, it
that
was.
they'll use to accuse you. That and basically they're meant to shut you down. They're meant to make you, because the goal of the left, the lunatic left, is they want you to shut up. They want you to stop talking, and they'll use whatever tool they can to try to make you do that. So either they'll use censorship to try to silence you, or if censorship doesn't work, they'll try to like just shout out at you. Or if you're talking to them one on one, they'll lob an accusation. And this is bully behavior. This is totally this is basically verbal terrorism, is what they do. This is why when somebody accuses you of racism, I'm like, okay, prove it. Prove that I'm racist. Okay, what's your claim and all that, and then I will actually have the definition of racism ready to go. My two criteria, because I've looked this up in the dictionary, two criteria of what racism is: one, having a prejudiced opinion about an entire group of people. That's one, and two, arguing that one race is superior or inferior to another race. That's my two criteria of somebody who's racist. You know, so when somebody says like, like, oh, you're a racist because you're a white man, I'm like, that statement right there is an absolutely unfounded accusation. Prove it. You need to prove that I'm racist. You know, it's like this is what they get away with. So don't let them off the hook, because this is how they act. So where were we, Steven? We were talking about
Ray Epps. So now we are moving on.
Trump?
Yeah, let's do it.
Segue.
Hard segue. Here we go.
All right, let's do this.
Here we go. All right, so I don't know why I went to that one, but
yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, I was like,
oh, because you had that new article.
Oh yeah, because I went to the conspiracy theories.
That's right.
Okay, so over the weekend, GOP rivals pounce on Trump after ex-pres fumbles when asked if a man can become a woman by Megyn Kelly. So that's a quick little video.
Can a man become a woman?
No.
In my opinion, you have a man, you have a woman. I think part of it is birth. Can the man give birth? No. Although they'll come up with some answer to that also someday. I heard just the other day they have a way that now the man can give birth. No, I would say I'll continue my stance on that.
Not a great answer. Yeah,
that was a horrid answer.
I would actually say that Vivek Ramaswamy actually gave a better answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like much better. He's unequivocal. He's like, no, you have people who believe what they want to believe, but your beliefs do not change reality.
Yep.
It's not even it shouldn't even be controversial, because the vast majority of the country does not believe that. It's only the real fanatics and the real activists that are trying to push that. This is like cultural engineering, like social engineering, and you can actually say that the proper position and not actually lose ground, except on the media, which of course is going to argue tooth and nail. This is basically the reason I don't like this is because this is basically Trump. One of the things that people loved about Trump, include myself, is that he was not a politician. He was a man who was like, he'll say whatever he wants. And he's like, the heck with it. I'm just going to say what's true. But this is more of a political answer.
It is.
And this is what happens when people transition from being regular people, and then they slowly start to become, they learn how to play the game. Trump is giving more and more answers now that are more political than real. And that's a little concerning to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So his feeble answer to derision from conservatives: don't tell me a man can become a woman because it's not true, DeSantis said Friday. Don't tell me a man can get pregnant because it's not true. There is value incentive for what is true. Florida government setting. Yep.
I'll give full kudos to DeSantis on that. That's a good answer.
Mm-hmm. So longtime Trump antagonist Eric Erickson, and what woke agenda is, it represents a war on the truth itself. When a former president does not immediately say no when asked if a man can become a woman, he does not need to be president again. Yep.
Well, I agree with the premise. I disagree with the conclusion.
Okay, well, that wasn't the only kind of kerfuffle that Trump's made on the weekend.
Mhm.
So, conservative contradictions. So, from Axios again, prominent conservative activists spent the weekend at war and denial over former President Trump's remarkable criticism of the anti-abortion rights laws enacted by a vast majority of Republican-controlled states.
Mhm.
So, in an interview on aired Sunday on Meet the Press, Trump vowed to bring both sides together in a grand compromise to limit abortion with exceptions after an unspecified number of weeks of pregnancy. Former President slammed Republicans for backing abortion bans without exceptions and called the 6-week ban signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis, Trump's chief rival for the GOP, a terrible thing and a terrible mistakes. So more than a dozen states ban abortion in all circumstances or after 6 weeks of pregnancy, including the first state in the GOP's primary calendar, Iowa. So this is a quick little video. Well, that's 1 hour. So
That's a long, that's the entire interview. Yeah.
yeah, Trump, I don't frankly care if it's regulated federal or state level.
Sign federal legislation that would ban abortion at 15 weeks?
No, let me just tell you what I do. I'm going to come together with all groups, and we're going to have something that's acceptable. Right now, to my way of thinking, the Democrats are the radicals. Because after 4 and 5 and 6 months, but you have to say this, after birth, you have New York State and other places that pass legislation where you're allowed to kill the baby after birth.
That's true.
Mhm.
But when you say that and then you immediately try and say that a 6-week ban is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake, especially when your running ground was that you are the most pro-life president in American history. And yes, he did have some major pro-life accomplishments during his tenure. He did have 3 judges that were nominated to the Supreme Court. And
overturned Roe.
And overturned Roe, and that's a massive
He was
accomplishment.
He was also the first president to attend the
March for Life. Yes.
Yep.
I don't think he'll be going back this year. I don't think Trump will be invited back to the March for Life after this. I really doubt it.
Well, it depends. It depends on what I think it's complicated.
A lot of major pro-life organizations have basically said that Trump is no longer their candidate of choice. They're like, if this is his view on abortion, which is to a lot of people and a lot of, like, for me, abortion is the most number one issue that I have in terms of voting. And for a lot of conservatives, especially Christian conservatives, abortion is the number one thing because, of course, it's human life that's hangs in the balance. Then saying that you're going to defend life and be a staunch defender of life is a very important criterion. And there are many famous pro-life organizations and activists like Live Action and Lila Rose and Matt Walsh, and they went guns blazing on Trump. And they're like, what are you doing? You're betraying everything you used to stand for, and for what?
Yeah. I think that the problem is that you have politicians that they start off very strong and very gung-ho on their positions, right? And that's usually why people love them, because they start off like they're unapologetic about their views and all that. But then as they go into the political career and learn how to play the game, then they try to they're trying to appeal to everyone. This is why Canadian politics, why it's so difficult to find a true pro-life conservative candidate, because they know that if they hold even a slightly reasonable pro-life position in Canadian politics,
they're going to get attacked as an extremist.
They're going to be attacked. They're going to be weaponized and all that kind of stuff. And that's the problem, is that a lot of politicians, in order to avoid the
castigations of the left, they will basically try to either downplay or hide or water down their pro-life positions, which I agree is not good. And I don't like that he's that he's being so squeamish about this. This is the opposite of what I like about Trump. Well, I find this interesting because in several things, primarily about abortion, but on several things, it seems as though Ron DeSantis is dictating Trump's policy.
Because Ron DeSantis is trying to frame himself as the more conservative, the more he's attacking Trump from the right. Is what?
Yes, he is. He is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in response, Trump is coming from like further to the left.
Yes.
And a lot of staunch conservatives are seeing that as, of course, a massive betrayal of values.
Mhm.
And I look at Trump, especially over the past weekend, and it kind of reminds me of what happened in the 2021 Canadian election.
With Aaron O'Toole.
With Aaron
right?
O'Toole. Because we elected Aaron O'Toole to be like, okay, yeah, you're a true blue conservative. You're standing up for conservative values. You're doing what is... And then he caved and became liberal light.
Yeah, he basically...
And he's like, okay, well, we'll take the moderate viewpoint, and we're just going to be like, we don't want to be called out as an extremist. We don't want to be saying this, like, oh, that's a terrible policy to like attack China for having COVID and not containing it well. Oh, it's a racist idea, and it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing to go against mask mandates or go against vaccine mandates. And so every single thing that Aaron O'Toole did was liberal light. And I'm like, yes, that's how Republicans used to campaign. Republicans used to campaign by saying, okay, well, we're not going to be that far right. We're just going to be kind of in the center. We're going to be middle ground. We're not going to do anything to you. We're not going to like take away your rights. We're just going to kind of play the field, and we're not going to make any crazy policies. We're just not going to spend any money, and we're going to try and keep taxes low. That's our primary focus, and we're not going to get involved in the culture war. We're not going to commentate on that thing because we're going to be attacked, and we're not going to try and change established law. And conservatives, real conservatives, felt very, very upset, justifiably, because even though these people had these beliefs personally, now, of course, like for me, I'm fairly certain that Trump doesn't have a lot of these beliefs personally, but a lot of these politicians were too afraid to come forward with their own beliefs. And now we're seeing more of a rise, especially in the governor's races. We are in the governor's houses. We're seeing a rise in governors and in like smaller leaders who are willing to stand up and say, nope, I don't care what you say to me. You can call me a racist. You can call me a bigot, a transphobe. I don't care. I'm going to stand up for what's right. I'm not going to sell my soul for power. And I really, really appreciate that about these modern conservative leaders, such as Ron DeSantis. Because given all these things and all these kind of attacks which he faces from the left, he's like, nope. Like, this is the way that we're going to do it in Florida. It's worked in Florida, and there's no reason to back down now. Your attacks mean nothing. And that's what I like. That's the primary reason why I support DeSantis. Like, people, I was attacked for the past couple days, be like, oh, principled conservative means loser. And I'm like, well, like, DeSantis might lose to Trump, but I don't have to cave on any of my beliefs to support DeSantis. And unfortunately, like, kind of going around, those, like, it was a really bad week, but not just for Trump, it was also a bad week for Trump supporters. So on top of the Trump stuff, so there were two family values conservatives, which openly support Trump, that were caught in some fairly underhanded, inappropriate affairs. So South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, which we have applauded, especially during COVID, she was having an absurdly blatant and public affair with handsy Trump aide Corey Lewandowski. So she's still married, but apparently she is engaged in a year-long affair with longtime Donald Trump advisor Corey Lewandowski, multiple sources told The Post. There are no images of them two getting frisky. Pair have been less than discreet about their relationship, with one source recalling them making out at a hotel bar during the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando. It was absurdly blatant in public, said the person who recalled Noem and Lewandowski getting handsy at the bar between 100 and 200 others around. It wasn't like 2 a.m. It wasn't like we caught them at some dive bar. It was the lobby bar where everyone was staying. There was a whole bunch of political operatives and journalists and elected. I remember I saw it with my own eyes. It was ridiculous. And then on top of that, You have Lauren Boebert jokes that she has peacefully parted with Date after they were removed from the theater. So she would not be going on another date with the man she was removed from a musical with in an incident earlier this month. Boebert and the man were kicked out of the performance in a Denver theater for disruptive behavior. An incident report from the Buell Theater, obtained by USA Today, said 2 unidentified patrons received 3 different complaints and were accused of vaping, singing, and causing a disturbance. The patrons, the report said, later refused to leave if they were asked to exit the venue, allegedly making statements such as, "Do you know who I am?" Boebert told TMZ at the airport in Washington, "It's always hard when there's gravity put on the voters. I'm here to provide levity and lift burdens off the people. Ultimately, all future dates have been canceled, and I learned to check party affiliations before you go on a date." Referencing a report, the man who appears in surveillance video with her is a Democrat. But all in all, it was mostly a lovely time, and I've taken responsibility for my actions. So it showed the pair touching each other and Boebert vaping, contradicting previous claims from her campaign, showed flashes of a phone, and Boebert's hands she appeared to take a selfie. And there are sections, I'm not going to show the video, there are sections of the video in which she reaches into his crotch. It's like, ugh. This is, like, okay. I'm going to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a dark room with your spouse,
mm-hmm.
yeah, you get a little frisky sometimes.
A little frisky. Yeah.
A little frisky. But...
Well, like the kids who find out their parents are actually like having sex, you're like, bah!
I know. Well, it's like sometimes it'd be like, oh, like this movie doesn't have many people going to it. Okay, then, sounds good. But when you're publicly singing, like when you're doing that, and then you're publicly singing, and then you're asked to leave, and you're like, nope, not gonna do it. I'm important.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, that's a problem. And then, like, I was reading another article about Lauren Boebert, and Lauren Boebert, like, she campaigned for the midterms, and I supported her during the midterms very vehemently.
Absolutely.
And
she barely won, by the way. She barely won.
She barely snuck by, yeah. And she ran during the midterms. She's like, oh, yeah, she ran. No. She ran during the midterms, and she's like, I stand with my husband, and we have this great company. We do this, and I stand by my family and everything. And I could never imagine life without my husband. Apparently in March... apparently in March, she didn't even go in person to tell him that they were being divorced. She sent him divorce papers from Washington.
Yeah.
And she had the police officer... She had the person go to the farm. And apparently there was, like, a police report filed... because her husband was so upset that he was, like, chasing the guy off the property screaming. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I'd be pretty pissed off, too. If somebody's like, oh, here's your wife's divorce papers, she's leaving you and she's never going to see you again.
Wow.
Like, that's really, really underhanded behavior. And, like, the reason that I'm tying this all together is we need a solid conservative voice. We need a solid conservative voice that is equal across the party to say, if we are going to be 100% the party of family values, the value of freedom, the party of doing what is conservative, because the Republicans are generally associated with the conservatives, if we are a party saying we are going to do what is right and we are going to do what's conservative, we need to hold our candidates to a higher standard. We need to say, okay, if you're doing wrong, then A, stop it and apologize, and then come clean to your voters and say, this is how I'm going to make amends and this is how I'm going to make things better. If you are exposed as, if you say in public that I am the party of family values, and then in private you're having secret affairs, this is a terrible, terrible look through the Republican Party. Because from all outside perspectives, it seems as though the Republican Party has been corrupted by this kind of attitude of complacency where it's like, well, it doesn't matter how we behave because our people will vote us in anyway.
I think that, how do I put it? Well, like, so for example, like, you know, Ken Paxton, one of the defenses a lot of people made for Ken Paxton in Texas is that, like, you know, he obviously, like, nobody defends, like, his extramarital affairs.
No.
Okay? But one of the things that people said, like, you know, like, extramarital affairs are so commonplace in like politics across the board, across every state, across like the federal government and all that, that it's almost hypocritical to hold like Ken Paxton to like crazy like high standard and nobody else like that that approach. Now, one of the things that people said like here in Canada with Justin Trudeau and like divorcing with his wife, people try to defend and say like like, well, politics is really tough on families and it's really difficult and all that kind of stuff, and we should just go like like go easy on him because like a lot of politically a lot of people in politics, it puts a massive strain on relationships, which I get. Now, one thing I find interesting is that one of the strengths of the Democratic Party is that they're basically like the Borg. Okay, they don't shoot their own. They don't basically like they basically will defend their own, even if like the most horrible allegations are like, yeah, it's fine. I don't care. No, it's all good. They just won't do anything. They'll defend them like tooth and nail. Whereas in the conservative movement, particularly Republicans in the states,
Mm-hmm.
uh, they get attacked on one side by the media and by the Democrats.
Yep.
And then they get like torn a new one by their own
Yep.
base, by their own side. They have a very difficult path to
They
be able
do.
to.
They
Even
do.
the good, even a lot of the morally like the moral like people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, when she came into politics, she was a family woman, had like success and all that.
Yep.
Didn't really want to. She felt she had to, but it is an incredible like meat grinder, and there's a reason why a lot of like really the most high end moral people avoid politics, and so the reason we get these like troubled and um very problematic like people is because we're not getting the top notch. The most moral people are the ones that don't go into politics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult. Like I get it
Oh, yeah.
because in the conservative movement, you're gonna get a lot of people who are not the top. This is why when I look at Trump, I don't like. Obviously, he's if I would sit down and think of the most amazing candidate possible for politics,
Mm-hmm.
I could come up with an incredible list. Like no, it would look a lot like a combination of Trump and Vivek and Ron DeSantis, Kristi Noem, like a lot of like people together, right? But the problem is that these are not the kind of people that end up actually going into politics, and a lot of times you have the the broken and the um and the less ideal people going in, and that's the problem. Is like, what do you do? Like, do you only support people who are like top notch, the ideal candidates, or do you support the ones that are going to be effective? It's kind of like in World War II. There was like what was his name? General Patton.
Yep.
Okay, and General MacArthur in the
Mhm.
Pacific Rim.
Yep.
Both of them, from what I've heard historically, from what I studied, these were very unpleasant people.
Yep.
They had like a very foul mouth. They were very like, man, they were no nonsense. They're the kind of people that like people did not like them. They
Mhm.
were just egomaniacs and all that kind of stuff. But they were insanely effective at what they did. MacArthur was incredibly effective in the Pacific Theater. Patton was incredibly effective and in Europe, right? Or like you look at the American Civil War, you have what was it? General Sherman
Mhm.
and General Ulysses S. Grant.
Yep.
These were not the best of the best. The first choice that President Lincoln had was a guy named McClellan. Okay, McClellan was like the ideal Boy Scout. He was the ultimate like like army guy. He checked all the boxes, but he was incredibly ineffective. He did not accomplish hardly anything, to the point where Lincoln eventually said, like, like you're basically useless. I gotta replace you because you're not accomplishing much.
Mhm.
And so I think in American politics, I think I don't know. It's difficult because these are politicians, and you have to like almost like make decisions based on who is going to be effective and who is going to be able to do much. I don't know. It's a difficult
No.
dilemma for conservatives, right?
Like I understand that like the people who are the best individuals. Like I look at individuals who are fantastic in public life and in private life.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are not going to be politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Like I look at people like Seamus Coughlin. Seamus Coughlin is fantastic. He has great values. He can present amazing arguments. He's not going to go into politics.
Neither is Tim Pool. He's been asked many times.
Yeah.
Refuses.
Or
He's
people
"No,
like
doesn't happen."
Kevin Sorbo, or like there's many people that live amazing private and public lives, but because of the strenuous nature of politics, they will stay away from it. And I agree. Like when you're in politics, there's a lot of pressure on you. There's a lot of eyes, and every single move you make is scrutinized from both the right and the left. Like, even like Michael Knowles was talking about DeSantis' 6 weeks abortion ban. He's like, the only thing wrong with the 6 week abortion ban is the 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm with you there. Like, I wish that there wasn't any line at all. But 6 weeks, of course, when you look at statistics, 6 weeks will take out 90% of abortions. And I'll take 90% of abortions over like 10% because that will save a lot more lives. That's why I have a lot of complaints with people who are like, oh, well, we need to be all or nothing, because you're never going to accomplish anything if you're all or nothing. You have to judge the circumstance by what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah,
in Florida, like a 6 week ban was passed by Congress, and then DeSantis approved it because Florida is now a hard red state, and Florida approves of a 6 week ban. You're not going to get a 6 week ban passed in New York, but in the United States, you might be able to have enough support to say, okay, we might be able to push for a 15 week across the board ban, because the only abortions that are going to, like 15 weeks is only going to allow, like, only, 5% of abortions happen after 15 weeks. And even most Democrats will go along with that. People, even staunch conservatives, they're not pushing for a full abolition across the board. But when you're saying, okay, well, we're doing this, but we're going to critique and we're going to attack the more conservative options, we have options that we can choose from. And yes, Trump is charismatic. Trump has the support, but
he's also effective. Let's put it that way.
Well, he's effective, but I think this is actually a sign of a potential indictment of how Trump is going to run. If he is going to continue down this path, then Trump will run very similarly to how Romney did, where it's all about appeasement and trying to take the center.
Yeah, and that could be detrimental to the actual campaign.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting how things are going to play out. Like if he comes back and be like, okay, yeah, like I messed up, and like we should not be kind of kowtowing to the left. We should be taking a hard stance and living with it. And I'm like, okay, yep, you made a mistake. You saw the reaction. But if he doubles down and continues to be like, okay, well, no, every decision has to be an appeasement, then like he should be rejected.
Yeah, we just don't want him to go Aaron O'Toole on us.
Yeah, we definitely don't want Trump to go Aaron O'Toole. Aaron O'Toole went from actually having decent standpoints to full-blown betrayal in 6 months. So
yeah,
we'll see. We'll see where Trump goes. Like Trump's had good stances in the past, but this is a terrible sign.
Yeah.
So let's continue with talking about the Republicans. The Republicans are in chaos. House GOP. Yanks vote to avoid a government shutdown after conservative rebel opposition. House will not vote to rule on advanced short-term resolution brokered between right-wing Freedom Caucus and the pragmatic conservative Main Street Caucus. Internal strife is playing out in the open as negotiators demand to know what right-wing opposers actually want. Short-term deal has no chance of passing the Senate as the end of fiscal year is 11 days away. So the vote cancellation Tuesday is the latest signs of a massive internal strife within the GOP that's likely to be the cause of a looming government shutdown. So the short-term deal would have been between the Freedom Caucus and the Mainstream Caucus would have held defense and Department of Homeland Security spending at 2023 levels and triggered an 8% cut to all other agencies. Don't think that's far enough. It also instituted the provisions of House Republicans' border bill. Aside from E-Verify, the bill leaves out funding for Ukraine and disaster relief. The short-term continuing resolution would have punted the funding deadline to October 30th, giving Congress an extra month to pass appropriations bill and fund the government for fiscal year 2024. Still, it triggered opposition from over a dozen Republicans, largely from within the Freedom Caucus, as those who worked out a deal demanded to know what exactly it is they want. So this is primarily kind of an action of individuals like Matt Gaetz. And Matt Gaetz is campaigning quite hard for the ousting of Kevin McCarthy in the United States, as McCarthy is the House Speaker. And like when Kevin McCarthy was first nominated, when they were voting on him, I'm like, I don't care for him. He's a squish.
Yeah.
Like, he has done some okay things, but it's sort of been 50-50. And unfortunately, in the United States House, because it's so vast, those who are actually going to push forth good policy are not going to become speaker. And unfortunately, of course, the Main Street Caucus is too squishy on a lot of things to actually push and stand up against the Democrats when the Democrats become pompous and demanding a whole bunch of things in the middle that are not agreeable. Like military funding that demands abortion. So caving on that is inappropriate. It's absolutely unacceptable to say, oh yeah, we'll agree to fund the military as long as we pay 100% for all military members to have abortions, because abortion has nothing to do with the military. But when like Kevin McCarthy really didn't see much of it out, yes, there was a ton of evidence to say that Biden should be impeached. It was 100% the right call, but because of all the pressure, it has been seen by a large chunk of the population as conceding to people like Matt Gaetz and the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah. Well, right now, like the Congress has a very interesting makeup because a lot of people were really disappointed with the results of the last election, like the 2022 one. But apparently, a lot of people made really good points that because of the slim majority that they have in the House, that means that the Freedom Caucus, or like basically the really true conservatives, everyone from Matt Gaetz to like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Chip Roy, people who are legitimately conservative minded, they actually have leverage, which is why Kevin McCarthy had to go through that massive like marathon session just to be able to be chosen as House Speaker. And in order to get that, he also had to make a lot of concessions. So it's good to see that like the people that we want to have legitimate like power, like to be able to exercise some to make some real change, are the ones that actually have that. The problem though is that I haven't fully read through this thing to find out what the whole story, but it sounds like the accusation is that they're doing the Freedom Caucus is doing a shutdown for the sake of a shutdown. They don't have any like clear message.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's true. Like that could just be spin.
Well, from what I've heard, they really don't have any like identifiable goals. Yeah. It's kind of like, we want to shut down to make McCarthy look bad.
But that doesn't sound in line with like Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is always he's a smart guy. I don't see him as just doing things for the sake of doing things. So I'd be curious to see what the breakdown of like what the rationale is for this whole thing. But this is significant because it means that there's a lot of deadlines that are always political. Like remember, like way back when they had the deadline for the what was it? Like the funding for Social Security and all the other stuff, like that kind of like or the default deadline. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, that was all talk. Nobody was going to go there because that's like basically like political suicide.
Yeah.
But still, it was like a lot of talking points about like, oh, are we gonna go like a default? Are we gonna go into default? And like, no. This one is more like it's not quite as big a deal as default, but it's it's looking like it's not business as usual, which I hate to say. I actually kind of like to see that because I like the disruptions because they actually at least make it obvious that the people in the Freedom Caucus are not playing around, and that you have to treat them with. You basically have to treat them as Kevin McCarthy can't just ignore them. They have legitimate power, and so let's hope that actually ends up in some good outcomes in the future. Anyways, go on, Stephen.
Alrighty, so let's continue on. Talking about a fairly interesting story from the Blaze about a Louisiana trucker wins right to display flags saying F Biden and F you for voting for him after town tries to stop him. Trucker in Louisiana run the right to display a flag with vulgar anti-Biden sentiment after a town tried to stop him. So Rose Brunnett filed a lawsuit against Grand Isle, a town on the Barrier of Reed in the Gulf of Mexico, after officials fined him for flying a flag reading F Biden and F you for voting for him. On Friday, Brunei settled the lawsuit with Grand Isle, which rescind the order barring the flag. The town was also ordered to pay $40,000 in lawyers' fees and damages. The agreement was that said the trucker was wrongfully cited for engaging in constitutionally protected speech of flying flags with a political message. By the city, Brunei filed a lawsuit in federal court accusing the city of infringing on his First Amendment free speech rights, as well as his rights under the Louisiana Constitution. His speech has in fact been chilled. He is fearful of and refrains from engaging in his protected political speech in Grand Isle to fear the government punishment or further retaliatory action. So, yes, we are in favor of free speech.
Yep.
That, of course, is not the best message to portray.
Yep. We're free speech absolutists. Like, what was the famous line is like, I may hate what you have to say.
I hate what you have to say, but fight to the death for you to say it.
Fight to the death of you to say it. Essentially, free speech as a concept is like it doesn't work if you put like hard limitations.
Yep.
This is why like people in Canada when they say like we have free speech here, I'm like
no,
we do. Like hate speech isn't free speech. I'm like
yes, it is.
I mean the whole idea falls apart because the idea is like only speech that the people who are power in society
the government deem acceptable. Yeah.
That's the only free speech. I'm like, that isn't free speech. You're missing the whole point. The free speech protects speech that is controversial and speech that is like that goes against what the government wants. That's the whole point of it. If you're only protecting popular speech and and watered down speech and speech that isn't offensive, then the whole concept falls apart. This is the kind of thing that people can get. So, I mean, again, I'm not a fan generally of the F Trudeau flags. Yeah. I understand why people fly them. People are angry, and people.
I understand the grievances.
People are angry not just because he's a bad politician. Like some people are angry because Justin Trudeau and his government are almost indirectly or directly responsible for loved ones dying, for losing their house, losing their business, losing all sorts of horrible things. These are legitimate angry people because they have like a legitimate grievance.
There's a rationale for it.
Yeah,
but
I'm like
I would say to this guy, be like, I think Biden is despicable. I think his policies have hurt a lot of people. But if you're saying, "Oh, F Biden, F you for voting for him," it's like, what is the point of a flag like this? A flag like a Trump flag would. It's supposed to be like, oh, like people who are supportive will express their support, and those who disagree, sometimes they're going to yell and scream. Sure. Others are going to ask you. Like I had some of my neighbors, they're like, oh, you're the guy with the Trump flag. Why did you do that? And I'm like, yeah, I had the Trump flag. I'll explain why. And they're like, oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I sort of get that. Sure. Like you're going to have, it's more open to conversation when it's less in your face and directly confrontational. Like this guy, you're not going to have too many people being like, oh, can you tell me about what that flag? Like, I voted for Biden. Can you, like, be like, oh, F you, and be like, This is not conducive to having a healthy discussion.
Yeah.
And if we are going to be like, yes, this is how the left treats people. Be like, oh, F Trump and F you for voting for him. Be like, okay, well, like, can we reach some common ground? Nope, you're a bigot. Like, even there was a post today about Ben Shapiro coming to Calgary on November 14th, which the show is too expensive, but we're definitely going to be outside trying to conduct some street interviews.
Yes, we are.
Because that's going to be a lot of fun. And this person commented, I'll be like, oh, like a bunch of racist incels. And I'm like, oh, like, do you have like any examples or like rationale for why you're calling them racist incels? And be like, because Shapiro's content is groomed towards racist incels. And I'm like, okay, can you give an example of that? He just is. And I'm like, well, you know, like, that's not a really great example. It's not proving your point very well.
Yeah.
If all you're saying is he just is. Because it's just trying to be in your face and confrontational. Like, even when we do street interviews and we meet up with people that are very, very hostile, we're not going to yell and scream at them. We're going to try and have a conversation with them.
Yeah, we're going to try to be civil.
We have a couple events coming up in the next few weeks or next few months. So, we might meet some angry people when we go to Life Chain in a few weeks.
Yep. Definitely.
And sure, like, if they yell and scream, be like, yeah, sure, we can yell and scream back. If they're driving by, we're not going to have a full-fledged conversation with them. But if somebody's walking along the road and yell something at you and be like, okay, well, like, you probably have some time. Did you not see the speech from Biden in Vietnam? The speech from Biden in Vietnam was hilarious. I'm going to go to my bed now. It was hilarious. And that's part of why this channel exists. We created this channel to give you the ability to have shrewd conversations. You can, instead of being purely confrontational, instead of just trolling, so that you can have valid conversations and so that we can actually change hearts and minds on these topics, because that's how you create long-lasting change.
Yeah, it's basically classical liberalism, which values reason,
yes, that's true.
persuasion, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Yeah, by the way, like this guy is basically advocating for the same basic complaint that they talk about in Timcast IRL all the time, which is that they complain that people keep voting for the very policies that are destroying them. Like, people in California and New York keep voting for the same things, and so they keep getting more of the same. And people are tired and sick of that kind of thing. Or they complain about, like, people who leave California, leave New York, leave Chicago, move to like red states, and then they vote like the same way as they left. So that the sentiment is the same. Like, that's basically the sentiment that this guy is trying to portray, but obviously he's trying to portray it in a very very, very, like, you know, in your face way, right? And so, yeah, like, I don't think it's going to be as persuasive, but I think he has a right to be able to be angry. Like, you know, just like those people who are yelling at AOC, they were not being, like, you know, thoughtful, and they're just angry, and they're just yelling at her, and they're, like, you know, letting her know that they're not. But I'm like, you know what? I think that's necessary. People need to be able to voice their anger. You know, like, you shouldn't, like, banning that and stifling that is not the way to create a healthy society. You're reading Conqueror's comment?
No, I was reading this this kind of this testimony on the classified documents indictment.
Oh, okay.
I'll
way to focus on the show.
Well, because I'm retweeting the show, and then it came up, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting read. Yes, focus, I did get. I know, focus. I got distracted. So let's talk about some of these other things that are fairly interesting. FDA panel will meet today. So this is from this morning.
Mhm.
to discuss ethics of growing human babies in artificial wombs after success in animals. So an independent panel advising the FDA will discuss trials of artificial wombs. This technology could treat the growing number of premature babies in the United States. And of course, scientists grow first artificial embryo without sperm or egg. A panel of government health advisors will meet today to discuss the ethics of growing babies in artificial wombs. The technology is successfully developed in several animals in recent years, prompting the FDA to consider whether it should be tried in humans. Many experts believe it could be a game changer if used to mimic the conditions of a womb and help treat health complications in the growing number of premature babies in the United States. So the Pediatric Advisory Committee and independent panel are meeting today. The 2-day meeting will help guide the agency. The FDA will make its own decision as not required to following the advisor's guidance. At this stage, artificial wombs aren't designed to grow a baby from scratch, though advances in the field have led to some believe it is on the horizon. Sadly, it will be used to care for the 1 in 100 infants born before 28 weeks, which is considered extremely preterm. It could also combat the infant mortality rate in the United States, which experts have warned is so much higher than in other developed countries. So, this is it. Like, it's interesting. I would not want to see this technology developed further than it is in terms of where in gestation. Like, if their goal is purely, okay, if there's some sort of injury to the mother, if there's some sort of situation where it would be potentially hazardous to deliver early, and the baby could be transitioned into this artificial womb so that they could live and grow and become full term and become far more likely to be delivered in a healthy manner and alive, then I'm okay with that, because it's in the emphasis
like,
of growing, of like sustaining and supporting and protecting human life.
It's like the instances of women who are pregnant and then they find out they have cancer and they have to have cancer treatments. In the past, you pretty much have to roll the dice either with an abortion, or you have to take your chances, right? But with this, it might actually mean that you might be able to actually have the baby survive and not have to put them at risk of having to go through the cancer drugs that would basically
Yes.
almost guaranteed to kill them, right? So that would be a good example of a legitimate use for artificial womb, right?
Oh yeah, like I'm not 100% against the idea of artificial wombs. Like, initially when I was thinking about artificial wombs, I was like, oh, like they just want to grow the baby in a lab and they just don't want to have it. And then I was like, well, that's basically the same as having a surrogate or going through IVF. Yeah. But that's not where the technology is right now. Where the technology is right now is, okay, in these very serious life-threatening conditions, we are going to act in an immediate basis simply to sustain that child's life because the mother, by some unfortunate accident, is no longer able to do so. But if it proceeds further and goes earlier in term, and you start to say, oh, well, this is a rationale for we can just grow a child from a test tube, and instead of finding a surrogate, then we'll just have a lab-grown baby. Then you come across the same arguments, or same rationale for opposing IVF. It's going to commoditize.
It's going to turn children
into commodities. Yes. And I'm, of course, very against that, because you really do not want to have children become something that you can just pay for as long as you have enough money. Because, of course, here at this channel, we're very open that children are a gift from God, that every life and every human is precious in the eyes of our Creator, and having a technology that subverts the design of God for procreation and family, so that people can just create their child from essentially a book. Be like, oh, I have a catalog of traits that I want. There was a video that these two gay guys I think it was from Ireland, put out today. And like, oh, we had like 5 surrogates that we called, or like 5 egg donors that we called. And I'd be like, well, like, your eyes weren't right. It just wasn't like they weren't bright-eyed and like the correct shape for me. So we turned her down, and her hair wasn't sleek enough. It's like, you are trying to make this perfect child because that's what we have done. We've allowed, by trivializing and menializing human life, especially life in the womb, we have made a child into something that you can just, if you don't want it, you can throw it away. If you want it, well, then you can pick the one that you want, because why not? Why can't you have the perfect baby? Why can't you have the perfect family? Why can't you have everything that is absolutely the way that you want it? And if anything even goes slightly wrong, then, oh, well, like, it's not my kid. I can just throw it out. Like, there was a story, I think it was from Australia, and they were suing the surrogacy or the IVF clinic because the baby was white and not black.
Oh, really?
I think that was the story. And they're like, oh yeah, no, like, we ordered a black baby. And they were like, well, like, we had some sort of mix up and it's a white baby. And they're like, take it back. We don't want the white baby. We want the black baby. It's like, wow. That's what it does. When you're saying, oh yeah, your human life is only valuable when it's convenient for me.
Well, and here's the part, like, when you're talking about, when you remove the normal natural process of, like, like two people coming together, getting pregnant, the woman basically incubating that child for like 9 months, the father, like, knowing that is his baby, and, like, seeing that all come together, there's an automatic bond to the point where, like, when a woman sees the baby for the first time, she loves it because there's an incredible bond that she's already built, and the father is the same way. When you remove that from the equation, you man, like, you just completely, like, decimate that bonding. So these men are looking at this child, and they have no actual connection to it whatsoever, which is why they're detached, and they just want the perfect baby, rather than, if this was like, if either one of these men was actually, like, had a baby the proper way with, like, a woman and all that, and they were actually the fathers, it would be so different. You wouldn't actually care anywhere near as much about whether or not this is the perfect baby. It's your baby, and because of that, it is perfect. I'm sure you had something similar to that with all of your children. When you first see them, you're just like, oh, like, you don't care if they're the ideal baby or not. You're just like, this is my child.
Yeah,
You have a bond.
Oh yeah, like, there's nothing like seeing the kid for the first time, and you're like, dang, like, this is a child, this is a human being that I'm responsible for. And yeah, like, you're filled with such a wave of emotions, from, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to do this, to like, I will do everything in my power, like, step on a landmine to keep that kid safe. Like, everything floods into you because you have that connection.
Exactly.
Like, Spirit of the War. Danny, top left corner. Danny does not have kids. I have 4. So yeah, Danny hasn't felt that kind of crazy insanity of the first time as a dad you see your kids. But it's oh yeah, like, Danny's connected. He's an uncle.
I'm a very interesting case, because I've worked with kids for most of my 20s, and so I'm very different than a lot of, like, a lot of guys, in that, like, I've just have a natural connection with kids, and I've always wanted kids, and I've had a very close bond. I have a very close bond with, like, a lot of my nieces, a lot of, like, my friends' kids, and all that kind of stuff. So I can kind of relate a little bit, because I know, like, I care, I truly care about, like, the kids that I'm with, but at the same time, I also know that what I like the feelings that I have the natural, like, feelings of affection and care that I have for the kids are probably nowhere near anything near what their parents have for them.
Yeah.
So
No, like
it's not.
it's a feeling that we're definitely hoping that you get to experience.
Yeah, me too.
So
just gotta find a girl. My mom,
yes.
my mom keeps telling me, like, when are you gonna give me grandchildren? And I'm like, Mom, if you really want, I can get you grandchildren tomorrow.
Oh no!
But you're not gonna like the methods. Like,
No.
if you want grandkids the right way, like,
it's gonna take some time.
It's gonna take time. It's like,
yeah. But
not that hard to get them. Like, if I really want to.
But talking about things that take some time, let's talk about the Pastor Art sentence.
Yeah.
So from True North. So Pastor Artur Pawlowski sentenced to time served for sermon at Coots protest. So the firebrand Calgary pastor who came to notoriety during the COVID-19 pandemic for violating lockdown measures has been sentenced to time served for his involvement in last year's Coots, Alberta protest.
Nice.
He's been convicted of mischief for breaching a release order. An Alberta judge sentenced him for 60 days in jail, though as he's already served 60 days behind bar, he was able to walk out of the courtroom without any additional incarceration. The Crown sought a sentence of 8 to 10 months, with the defense arguing time served would be adequate. He delivered a fiery sermon. It wasn't that fiery. Who blocked
It was the only reason. Okay, so for anybody who doesn't know, the reason why the government went after, like, him at the Coots protest is because the government's goal was to break up the Coots blockade. Essentially, that was their goal.
Yeah, that was
and
their goal.
Pastor Arthur went there to encourage the guys, and the government argued that it's like that they were, I don't know, that they were on the brink of giving up and, like, like packing up and being like, yeah, we're not going to be able to do this. And then Pastor Arthur gave a very impassioned speech, and they were like, yeah, let's do this, and they kept going. And the government was like, oh, hell no. And they were pissed because they were trying to do everything that they could to try to, like, break it up. And they got mad at the pastor because he was more effective in his messaging than the government was. And so, so they basically had to resort to very shady things like, planting guns on a house in Coots in order to frame the people for
going against them, for dissenting against the government's ideology.
Basically, they framed them of being like, like a terrorist trying to, like, overthrow the government.
Yep.
Anyways,
which is exactly what they're trying to convict these people of.
Yes.
So tomorrow there is going to be a rally. Unfortunately, it's midweek. So I was feeling rather sick this morning, so I took today off, and I was like, dang, I was hoping to take, like, the morning off yesterday to go to this, but I already missed one day this week.
Can't do it.
So I'll watch it live. So Warmington, even its spies try and derails it. Hands of Our Kids protest is set for Wednesday. Planning this for a large national protest has been something like out of a Jean Le Carre thriller.
I don't even know who that is.
I have no idea who that is.
Yeah.
So spies infiltrating parents group Hands of Our Kids, which is planning Wednesday's 1 Million March for Children, protest over gender ideology teaching in Ontario schools. It has happened to Toronto organizer Bahira Abdul Salam. Some of the people she thought were helping coordinate the September 20th demonstration at Queen's Park and city halls across Canada were actually working to derail it, said, claiming one to be the leader hijacked it by saying they were cancelling the protests. Kamal El-Sheikh said they had similar issues for the Ottawa event. Yeah, they tried to sabotage. We're now highly sophisticated. As a result, we have our intelligence as well. So this was actually interesting because I saw this tweet, and I'll see if I can find... I'll find this tweet, and somebody responded to this tweet, or somebody retweeted it.
So what was it?
So this is Bahira Abdullah Salam, one of the leaders. Amazing meeting with police forces at Queen's Park, getting the safety arrangements for the 1 Million March for Children. There was an individual who quoted this. There was this one. We'll be at Queen's Park too, supporting our children instead of pretending to be LGBTQ guards, hoping you're on their side. This should be investigated.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm like, it should not be investigated if they are, and I made a comment, investigated their weak cops prevent the pro-trans group from getting violent. It's like, yeah, that's unfortunately what a lot of these pro-transgender people want, is they don't want the cops to be out there trying to enforce safety. They want those, they want them to be their agents. They want them to ensure that the pro-family group, the child defense groups, are living in fear and are afraid to come out for fear that they'll get assaulted.
Yeah, like you can already see like people, all of the lunatic leftists out there, from like the media personalities, government to the government, MPs and all that kind of stuff. They basically just like lob out a million accusations. Like these people are racist, they're xenophobic, they're transphobic, they're everything, they're white supremacists, all this kind of stuff, right? Because they don't actually want to actually address the concerns and the things that they're trying to protest, right? They're just all about delegitimization and all that kind of stuff. But it's amazing to me that this entire thing has been launched and organized by the Muslim community.
Yes.
And I will say that this is amazing because the Christian community has been very sadly
shockingly
silent as children are pretty much being lifted up on the altar of woke sacrifice. It's sad that the Muslims are the only ones that are basically making any real noise, and the Christians are basically,
unfortunately, as we've mentioned time and time again, the Canadian churches, and a lot in the United States, unfortunately, the Canadian churches look at the situation that's unfolding around us in terms of wokeism, in terms of like doing what is right.
Yep.
And they'll say, well, we're not called to, like, that would be judgmental.
Oh, no, it's the gospel. It's not a gospel issue.
Oh, yeah, it's not a gospel
issue. I've heard that so many times.
I hate that.
Like, clearly, I don't know where they're getting it, but everyone's saying the same thing, and I'm like,
well, it's just an extrapolation of this seeker-sensitive gospel message,
yes.
Where if it's not like directly leading people to Christ, which yes, our lives, the way that we live, should be bringing people to Christ because it's an example of good and holy and upright living, or at least it should be. That's how we should be aiming and desiring to live. But aiming to be like Christ also means that when we see evil, especially evil that targets children, we have to be the ones to say, no, that is inappropriate, that is wrong, and we should be calling it out no matter what the consequences are. But unfortunately, too many churches and too many Christians are afraid of being called out, are afraid of being attacked, and being called judgmental and bigots and all these other things, and so they're more afraid of the name-calling than actually doing what is right and what is proper and what is godly. And so they're leaving these children to the wolves and saying, well, like, we've taught you some biblical values, just, like, be kind and loving. And it's like, that's not enough anymore. There are children in which there are classrooms in which 10 out of 24 kids are identifying as trans. We are letting these teachers exploit and groom children, and we're saying, not our problem.
Yeah. For a long time, Christians have been told, like, we're not supposed to be political.
Yeah.
If you're a Christian, being political is bad, or it's like out of whack or something like that. And I'm like, that has become almost like it's like the phrase that people always quote in church circles. It's like, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Like the sentiment, you can understand. Like if you're gonna evangelize, make sure your life reflects the gospel that you're trying to promote. But people use that as an excuse not to evangelize. They're like, oh, I'm just going to evangelize by being a real person. It's like, yes, but all throughout the New Testament and church history, people evangelize by evangelizing, by actually going out of their way to tell people about Christ. And so the same way with this kind of stuff, sadly, they're like, this is why I appreciate Pastor Arthur. Pastor Arthur is not the best. He's not the best pastor I can think of, like the top notch and all that. But he's one of the few that are actually putting their money where their mouth is. And unfortunately, the pastors that you might always look at as like, these are the exemplars. These are like the best and all that. Like they're not actually standing up. For a long time, Stephen and I went to Center Street Church here in Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone that you talk to, they're like, you talk about Pastor Henry, okay, Pastor Henry Shore, who's the lead pastor at that church. Everyone had nothing but good things to say about Pastor Henry. Oh, he's great. Oh, he's amazing. Such an incredible, like pastor, incredible leader, like the whole thing. Nothing but praise for him. But suddenly, crisis comes, and he not only does he become a wallflower, he disappears, but he even defends it. He defends basically avoiding the fires of persecution under under the pretense that, oh, this is what God wants us to do. That was a justification. So yeah, so I'm hoping that things will change, and that hopefully people like Christians will start to become more and more bold in defending not only defending the values that once made this country great, but also defending the lives of people, because these movements are targeting kids very aggressively, and they're gonna hurt all of us. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. One last thing there, Stephen.
Nope. No, that's basically it. So, all right, that's basically where we're going to wrap up. We've been going for 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're going to end today's show. If you've been watching on our live stream platforms, such as Twitch and Twitter, thank you for joining in the conversation. There was moments where it was kind of crazy. If you're following us on our video platforms, such as YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble, then, of course, like, share, comment, and subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
Everything helps the algorithm of big tech organizations.
One thing we should say is, if you can, even if you don't use it regularly, can you please, just do us one favor and subscribe on Rumble if you haven't done it yet?
Yes.
We need to get our Rumble subscriptions up, and they're kind of frozen. So even if you share with your friends and tell, you know what, can you do one thing? Just share, get people to subscribe on Rumble, because the subscription doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't even impact you that much.
It doesn't give you notifications really,
but it gives us more options, and it
means we can live stream onto
Rumble.
Yeah, which
and that would
I would prefer live streaming onto Rumble than live streaming onto Twitch or Twitter, because Twitch we have to be somewhat careful what we have to say, and then Twitter really isn't a great live stream platform.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing to say. The other thing that we're going to say is that Thursday, so we're going to have, I believe it's going to be 2 open mic Thursdays in a row. So on Thursday is going to be the episode 300.
Yeah.
So we're going to invite as many the people that we can who have been part of the podcast for a while. Mm-hmm. And then if you have interesting tidbits, interesting little commentary about your favorite moments about the show, things you learned from the show, or things that you want to talk about, that's what... do you have the Rumble link? Yes, I can easily get the Rumble link.
Oh, Rumble?
Yep. So this will be... This is the link to the content.
Yeah, because we have 75 or 74 followers on.
Yeah.
And if we can get, I think it's up to 100, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100 to live stream.
Yeah, that's the only one of the downsides with Rumble right now is that, unlike YouTube, which really, I don't know, doesn't really seem to have a major limit on how many subscribers you need to be able to live stream there. Rumble does have a limit, and so yeah, if we can get the Rumble the subscribers up, even just up to 100, that would basically mean that we can stream on Rumble, and that would be a huge help, because Rumble is really the only alternative live streaming option that we could really use to get in near future. So yeah, if you can help us out, that would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. All right,
thanks guys.
So You can also check us out on our text platforms at theshrewddudes.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Gitter.
Mm.
All right. That being said, we'd like to remind you of the Shrewd Dudes podcast, Why Be Rude When You Can Be Shrewd. Have a great night, everybody. We will see you on Thursday for our 300th episode extravaganza. Until then, have a great night. And as always, God bless.